Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Bei Bei met Elder Xian's eyes and continued, if one person has to be blamed for this, then I am the one to blame, because I was the one who approved this operation. Elder Xian, I'm not trying to take their responsibility away from them, but I will not attempt to lessen my own. No matter how and why this thing happened, I was still the one who made the final decision. The outcome and consequences have far exceeded our judgments and expectations, and it's true that we have taken many lives. Nobody wished to see this happen, because these citizens are innocent even though they reside within our enemy's territory. We will take full responsibility for this. I can only say that over at the academy, the entire Tang sect will pull out of the inner courtyard except for Huo Yuhao. This way, the Tang sect can take full responsibility if word of this incident does get out, and the academy's reputation won't be affected. However, Huo Yuhao cannot leave the academy. You should remember that Elder Mu has instructed us that Yuhao is to be the subsequent generation's master of the Sea God's Pavilion. This mistake happened because of my inadequate command and leadership, so he shouldn't be the one to bear all the responsibility. Furthermore, you've seen the things he can do with your own eyes. He is the academy's future. If Yuhao is allowed to truly grow up, Shrek will always be the continent's #1 academy. Elder Xian shook his head and said, all right. I know how everything happened and I trust you guys. Get some rest. We'll get going in 15 minutes. Elder Xian surveyed everyone with calm eyes after that before turning and leaving without saying anything else. Shu Sanxia came up beside Bei Bei. They were both quite severely injured, and these two brothers exchanged a look as Shu Sanxia couldn't help but ask, what's this? Is that it? He Kaitu touched his round and bald head as he said, I think there was nothing much to this in the first place, and you guys are overthinking things. What else can happen? Everything has already happened. Furthermore, nobody knows that we were the perpetrators. The truth is, I think Dorna's speech swayed Elder Xian the most. How many people would have died if such frightening weapons had been used on the battlefield instead? This enormous explosion occurred underground where it was sealed off, and even then it had such a tremendous effect on the surface. What if this explosion went off on the surface instead? I calculated the explosion's force, and I can tell from its impact that this explosion was equivalent to 10 or more Class 9 stationary cannon shells going off at the same time. What are Class 9 stationary cannon shells? A single one can destroy an entire small city, and it can wipe out an entire legion out of existence. This explosion was intense and violent, but I believe the death count isn't as high as it seems, either. Why? Xiao Xiao asked doubtfully. That explosion seemed to sweep across the entire city. Dust and smoke billowed throughout the sky, and there were also terrifying shockwaves. It felt like the apocalypse was upon us. He Kaitu answered, trust the professional. Little junior brother was involved, so he couldn't calculate as calmly as I did. Let me ask you, little junior brother, how thick were the warehouse's walls, and what were they made of? Huo Yuhao replied without hesitation. The walls were constructed mainly of alloys and granite. The alloys were more than 2 meters thick, and the granite behind them was at least 15 meters thick. Their design during construction probably relied on the alloy's toughness, and the granite's thickness, and hardness for perfect underground support and defense. He Kaitu nodded. That's it. Since that's the case, the first instant after the great explosion in this large underground warehouse would have released enormous amounts of heat that would have expanded outwards. However, that expansion process would have been barricaded by so many tough blockades. How much force could leak onto the surface? I believe your calculations are correct. The release of high temperatures that were compressed within the underground warehouse from this vigorous explosion would definitely destroy those soul tools, while most of the rare metals would melt, and some would be mixed with stone and gravel and thus would no longer be usable. I believe we have perfectly achieved our goal, and the only problem that we didn't think about was that the expanding heat caused some Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells stored in another nearby warehouse to detonate. That warehouse was used to store Class 9 shells, so that means its defenses and layering must have been a lot tougher and stronger than the warehouse you guys were in. Illustrious Virtue Hall had been robbed before, so they've learned their lesson from that experience. How could they not be careful? Therefore, if the underground defenses were so strong, the explosive impact wouldn't shift horizontally. Instead, it would be pressed to explode upwards, and the explosion caused those vigorous tremors and a minor earthquake, just as Huo Yuhao had predicted. However, those Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells increased this earthquake's magnitude. The hurricane of sand and stone that we saw earlier came from the sand and stone that this explosion carried into the sky, and it swept across the entire city. But the region at the explosion's epicenter suffered the heaviest losses, and that region is far smaller than 1/3 of Radiant City. People will die, and the number won't be small. However, claiming that 1/3 of the entire city's population will die is impossible. Destroying those underground warehouses was the real blow that we have dealt the Sun Moon Empire this time. Huo Yuhao nodded continuously as he listened to Hikaitu's analysis. He felt a lot better with his second senior brother's reminders, and his train of thought cleared up. Some of Hikaitu's words were shots in the dark, but not everything he had said came from pure conjecture. Huo Yuhao dug into his memory and confirmed Hikaitu's analysis. Xiao Xiao laughed and said, "When did you become so smart, Kaitu? Why haven't I felt this way before?" Hikaitu immediately felt as if he had spoken a little too much today. He smiled sheepishly and said, "I was worried that little junior brother would overthink things. I want to take this opinion to Elder Xian, and I think he will find this matter a lot easier to accept if I do that." Hikaitu instantly tucked his tail in and ran away. Jiang Nan heaved a faint sigh and said, "War is the cruelest thing. I hope our actions will delay the war, and it would be better still if the war didn't happen at all." Huo Yuhao shook his head and said, "That'll be very difficult. The Holy Ghost Church is strong, and Shu Tianran is wildly ambitious. They will sustain heavy losses from this, but what we have done is far from enough to extinguish his wolfish ambitions. I'm sorry, Radiant City. Fourth senior sister is right, war is the cruelest thing, and what I have to do as an ultimate soldier is to rely on just myself in a war against my enemies. Even though many people have died this time, I will not regret my actions, because I have prevented more from being sacrificed in a war, and now we have more time to prepare." Bei Bei chimed in. "This matter will have nothing to do with the Tang sect as long as the Academy doesn't speak about it. After all, we are not the Sun Moon Empire's only suspects. The Body sect is adept at moving through the ground, and they are a lot more suspicious than we are." Shu Sansha mused, pushing the blame to others. "That sounds a little evil." He paused for a moment before he continued, "But why do I feel like I like it?" Jiang Nan snapped, "That's because the two of you are equally thick-skinned." Who was it? Who was it? Shu Tianran roared furiously, and his indignant voice echoed throughout the Imperial Palace. Many people were helping out with the wounded and treating them at this moment, as numbers and data continued pouring in. Just as Ikaitu had predicted, the death count from this incident wasn't that serious. However, the Sun Moon Empire's financial losses were immeasurable. Uncountable structures inside the Imperial Palace had collapsed, but the servants were all working, because it was daytime, and thus hardly anybody was buried in the rubble. Furthermore, the interior structures of Soul Tools were tough. Even so, voluminous amounts of money would be required to repair and restore the Imperial Palace. Many of the Imperial Palace's Soul Tools were damaged by the intense shockwaves, let alone its various structures. Other than that, enormous patches of structures had collapsed, with the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy at the epicenter. The city's death count and injury count continued to rise, and the loss of life and livelihood was severe, even though the losses weren't as high as the mighty explosion should have inflicted. Shu Tianran wouldn't wince at some of his citizens' deaths. What made him feel so much pain and agony was that the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, an illustrious virtue hall, had vanished from Radiant City. Large amounts of the resources that were stored in those underground warehouses were gone too. They represented the basis of his invasion plans. Everything was gone. What did that mean? It meant his plans had been pushed back indefinitely. Furthermore, the Sun Moon Empire had trouble sustaining these losses, even though they were exceptionally wealthy. Jing Hongchen almost vomited blood when he discovered that the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy was at the explosion's epicenter, and nearly fainted on the spot. The illustrious Virtue Hall was the basis of everything that he was, and this explosion would push the Sun Moon Empire's research progress back years. There was no need to mention the number of people from illustrious Virtue Hall who had perished in the explosion. The only reason why Jing Hongchen didn't pass away from anger was because he had been keeping his grandchildren beside him this entire time, because he had felt that the recent situation was a little unstable. Xiao Hongchen had been heavily wounded, and Shu Tianran took the initiative and brought him into the Imperial Palace for treatment. Because of that, Jing Hongchen's grandchildren survived the blast peacefully. If his precious grandson and granddaughter had died in the blast, Jing Hongchen would have expelled every single ounce of his life energy in a mouthful of blood. Your Highness, Your Highness. It's not good. A vigorously trembling voice was carried from far away, as a servant scrambled towards Xu Qianran. He was clearly grieving and despondent. Xu Qianran retorted angrily, "What's not good? Everything's happened because of you bastards calling out ominously. Your Highness, the Emperor, he has passed away." Xu Qianran's furious face instantly froze when he heard those words. A strange light flickered beneath his eyes. This seemed to be the only piece of good news amidst his colossal losses today. The Emperor's death meant that he, who was the crown prince, had a chance to ascend to the throne. He had enough influence and power to support him in his bid for the throne, and the strongest resistance that he faced came from Xu Guozhong's lineage. But how could Xu Guozhong survive that tremendous explosion? Suddenly, everything doesn't seem all that bad. Xu Qianran gritted his teeth as he looked up at the troop of evil soul masters who had already gathered in the sky. He suddenly cried out painfully, "Father, father! How can you leave just like that?" 2 lines of tears streamed down his cheeks, but nobody knew whether they came from grief or from regret. There were mountains all around, and not a single ray of sunlight shone through. This was the center of the Sun Moon Empire's western mountains, and this gigantic valley was more than 5 kilometers around. This valley was exceptionally spherical. The valley sank down into a hemisphere, and the bottom was filled with clear lake water. The lake water gleamed, and it was so clear and crystalline that the lake bed could be seen. Several shadows broke the tranquility of this place right at this moment. They were soaring through the sky, and they quickly arrived above the lake's surface. One would realize upon closer inspection that there were 4 people. 2 of them had black veils covering their faces, while they each carried someone in their hands. One was a young man, and the other was a young girl. The young man and the young girl were crying out in alarm and surprise. However, they couldn't move at all, and they couldn't struggle even if they wanted to. The 2 people in black swiftly brought them to the center of the lake and hovered in midair. They stared at the water beneath them, and they raised their captives above their heads. "You, what are you trying to do?" The young man shouted dismally with a trembling voice. One of their captors answered him. His voice sounded a little husky as he said, "We want to organize a grand sacrificial rite, and we need a living human as our sacrifice. We happen to have captured the 2 of you, who also happen to be married to each other. Speak now, who wishes to be sacrificed? We will let the other person go." "No, please. I beg you, let us go." Judging by her age, the young girl didn't seem like she had been married for long. Her voice was quivering at this moment, but she stared at her husband with a pleading and begging look in her eyes. Her husband stared back at her with sluggish eyes. Suddenly, he roared at the top of his voice, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Use her. Use her as your sacrifice." The wife stared at her husband, who she had made vows with, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. How can you do that? Didn't you say that you would protect me with your life? You're such a liar." Her husband howled hysterically, "We only live once, and this life is gone when we die. What about you? Do you think you're any better? What was that look in your eyes before this? Don't you want me to sacrifice myself for you? I'm so nice and good to you, so why won't you sacrifice yourself for me so that I can live?" "Nonsense. I want to live, but I only want to live with you. Go to hell, you're the one who should die. Kill him, kill him." The wife's emotions had become a little hysterical and distraught. 2 chilly lights flashed and slashed the couple's throats at the same time. Fresh blood erupted from their gaping wounds like a fountain, and poured onto the lake's surface beneath them. The couple's eyes were filled with incredulity and disbelief, and they seemed like they wanted to ask something, but they were just no longer able to do so. One of their captors muttered disdainfully, "This is the fickleness of human nature, and everyone goes their separate ways when disaster arrives. How many times have we done this? This has never failed before. This place is quite peculiar, though it can only be primed by the lives and blood of a man and woman who are in love, but betray each other in the end." The other man in black lowered his voice and said, "Cut the crap. Quickly, drain them of their blood so that we can go back and make a successful report on our task. This place will be activated 2 hours after it has been primed, and even saints can't escape from this when that time arrives. Any humans inside will be." The first man in black seemed to recall something, and said nothing more. The couple's blood was swiftly drained, and their lives came to an end. Kaplunk, kaplunk. 2 corpses plunged into the lake, and the 2 men in black turned and soared into the sky. They departed rapidly, as if they were running from something, and vanished in the blink of an eye. In the few minutes after they disappeared, the lake's surface began to ripple and surge. The couple had just dropped into the lake, but their blood undulated and gradually began to lighten as strange colors started to appear. Those were golden and silver hues. Golden light flickered while the silver light rippled, and they permeated the lake's surroundings at an alarming rate. Let's go. Elder Xian instructed the company. Shrek Academy's company immediately set out once more after their short rest and continued westward. They had no other choice at this point. The colossal explosion in the middle of Radiant City would undoubtedly end this season's grand competition without proper closure. The Doluo continent's 3 main countries' tense relationships with the Sun Moon Empire would undoubtedly be aggravated because of this explosion as well. The Sun Moon Empire's citizens probably hadn't really supported war before this, but it wasn't hard to imagine what their opinions would be like after this incident. Elder Xian's expression seemed a little better after he listened to He Kaitu's explanation. If the Sun Moon Empire's death count wasn't as bad as it seemed, then their operation could only be described as impeccable. The company could only progress through the Western Mountains because they were afraid that flying through the air would draw attacks from the Sun Moon Empire's long-range soul tools. Everyone in the company was relatively powerful, and they scaled hill after hill as they pushed forward. They arrived within the Western Mountains' inner regions in no time. However, a strange atmosphere appeared right at this moment. This place looks very familiar. I think we were here 2 hours ago. Huo Yuhao was back inside his human-shaped soul tool. He had plugged 1 Class 6 milk bottle in each of the machine's reserve slots. With these 2 milk bottles supporting him, he could spare a lot more energy to recover his spiritual power and his soul power throughout the journey. The Western Mountain could present unforeseen problems and obstacles, so Huo Yuhao had his spiritual detection activated this entire time. He alternated between different directions as he surveyed and scouted far into the distance, searching for problems that might appear. He hadn't discovered anything throughout their journey so far, but the feeling that something was wrong became stronger and stronger. Huo Yuhao didn't know why he was feeling that, but he was confident that something bad was about to befall them. The ominous feeling in his mind seemed to mature at this moment. Stop, everyone. Elder Xian drifted over to Huo Yuhao's side. He had always had faith in Huo Yuhao's spiritual power. Are you saying that we've circled back? Can it be that there is a maze inside the Western Mountains? Such a problem shouldn't occur with our ability to discern direction and our navigational abilities. Elder Xian looked up at the stars in the night sky as he spoke. Observing the stars at night had always been a good way of telling direction. Huo Yuhao lowered his voice and said, I am positive, Elder Xian, that we've been to this place before. The reason is because I did a single direction sweep in this place before, and there are still some remnant spiritual imprints of that on the plants around us. That can't be wrong. Elder Xian's expression instantly grew solemn. He was a rank 98 transcendent Doluo, a powerful being who was almost an ultimate Doluo, yet not even he had detected anything wrong. They were going around in circles, and this proved that the situation was quite serious. What do you think we should do? Elder Xian lowered his voice as he asked Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao answered, the sky is too dark at this moment. I've attempted to reach far into the distance with spiritual detection, but the further I go, the less clear our surroundings become. I can only feel out the rough landscape, but I'm unable to use my spiritual power to do any in-depth observations. Should we rest and wait for daybreak? Dawn is coming soon. Elder Xian nodded and said, all right, let's wait for daybreak then. Rest where you are everyone, and stay together. Don't get separated from each other. Lishuan, you're responsible for arranging the shifts for night watch. Those who are resting, meditate as soon as possible. Zhong Lishuan immediately went ahead to arrange the night shifts. She was the inner courtyard's eldest senior sister, and she was also part of the Sea God's Pavilion, so she had always been efficient at arranging such things. It didn't take long before a small-scale campsite was established on a location that was relatively higher than their surroundings. Several titled Doluo, including the martial god Doluo Xianlina, rested near the edge of the campsite, so that they could protect everyone. There were 5 titled Doluo who were part of Elder Xian's company, and there were 4 transcendent Doluo, including Elder Xian. However, they had quite a few people to protect. The Tang sect comprised the largest group Bei Bei, He Kai-tu, Shu Sansha, Jiang Nan Nan, Xiao Xiao, Huo Yuhao, Wang Dong'er, Ji Juechen, Jing Ziyan, Nan Qiuqiu, and Nunna. There was also one other person that Huo Yuhao had roped in for the operation last night, and that was Jiao Delu, who possessed a ranked carving knife of his own. Huo Yuhao had used some rare metals to completely bring this self-established soul engineer over to his side. Besides the Tang Sex Company, the title Doluo also had to protect the team from Shrek Academy, who had come to participate in the tournament: Wang Chua, Dai Huobin, Zhu Lu, Zhu Enchen, Cao Jinxian, Lan Susu, Lan Luoluo, Wufeng, Ning Qian, and Xia Huanyue. In addition to their eldest senior sister, Zhong Lishuan, these title Doluo had quite a few people to protect. The 6 title Doluo's most important task was to escort these people. There were more than 20 of them safely back to Shrek Academy. Dai Huobin and the others from Shrek Academy's team were full of doubt and suspicion as they watched the mysterious and secretive looks on the others from the Tang sect. They were deeply shaken by the frightening explosion before this, and they also noticed that Elder Xian had inquired of the Tang Sex Company in private. Did that mean the Tang sect had something to do with that explosion? The Tang Sect's company naturally huddled together. They had hustled throughout the night, and Huo Yuhao was naturally the most exhausted one. He almost instantly entered meditation, and his fatigued expression didn't look so good under the firelight. Wang Dong'er walked discreetly beside Wang Chua and whispered, "Can I discuss something with you, Chua?" "What?" Wang Chua replied coldly. Wang Dong'er continued, "Huo Yuhao is too exhausted today. Furthermore, he'll have reconnaissance duties when dawn comes, so he has to recover his energy as quickly as possible. We can both fuse our martial souls with him, so will he recover faster if the 3 of us cultivate together? Therefore, I'm asking that you." Wang Chua's eyes undulated for a single moment as she gave Wang Dong'er a deep stare. Wang Dong'er was also staring at her, and their gazes met as Wang Chua saw the clarity in Wang Dong'er's eyes. She finally nodded. Wang Dong'er was elated as she hurriedly said, "Thank you, Chua." The 2 girls arrived beside Huo Yuhao. Wang Dong'er sat opposite him, while Wang Chua sat behind him. Wang Chua raised her palms and placed them on Huo Yuhao's back, as Wang Dong'er carefully placed her hands on Huo Yuhao's. She channeled their Haodong power before she raised his palms and placed hers against them. Huo Yuhao was too familiar with cultivating with Wang Dong'er. Even though he was already in meditation, he immediately felt it when their Haodong power began to circulate, and he naturally started to cooperate. His recovery would undoubtedly be a lot faster and more efficient with Wang Dong'er's help. However, a wave of powerful soul power flowed in from his back at this moment. In the beginning, this soul power seemed a little violent as it barged around, but the 3 different soul powers quivered when this third soul power interacted with Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong'er's Haodong power before all 3 strands began to interact and intertwine. There were 3 different entities intertwined together, but they could also be counted as 2, because the Haodong power was one body in itself. Wang Chua's soul power came afterwards. Wang Chua's soul power was still overbearing and felt a little forceful, but this forcefulness didn't carry any impact. Instead, it began to circulate and rotate once it interacted with the Haodong power, and its color also began to change. Huo Yuhao sensed, to his surprise, that the purplish-golden hues that had reigned supreme on the competition stage and defeated the bone dragon, Yang Feng, appeared once more. This wasn't a martial soul fusion skill. Instead, it was a direction fusion between their soul powers. That purplish-golden soul power began to flow through Huo Yuhao's body, and every passageway felt smooth, as if it had been warmed and ironed. Huo Yuhao's spiritual power seemed like it was being encompassed and boosted within all those purplish-golden colors. Huo Yuhao's entire body felt transparent, and his circulation was smooth and unobstructed. That sensation was just fantastic, and it didn't take long before Huo Yuhao's passageways became entirely purplish-golden in color, and even his spiritual sea was blanketed with a faint layer of purplish-golden light. Huo Yuhao wasn't the only person who enjoyed this pleasant and comfortable feeling. Wang Dong'er and Wang Chua shared the same sensations. Wang Dong'er discovered to her surprise that their cultivation didn't just sublimate when Wang Chua added her soul power into the mix. Furthermore, her soul power fusion with Huo Yuhao seemed a lot tighter and more intimate than before. Their soul power circulated more rapidly when it flowed into her body, and it even expanded her passageways as it boosted her qi and blood. Wang Dong'er had light-type abilities, while Huo Yuhao's main martial soul was spiritual type. Wang Chua's forte was strength, and this strength represented the body and the body's blood vessels. These three entities complemented each other, as mysterious lights flickered on their faces, amidst the emanating purplish-golden colors. Elder Xian quickly noticed their transformations, and walked over at once. On the surface, Huo Yuhao, Wang Donga, and Wang Qiu's faces undulated with a faint and elegant, but mysterious purple color, while this purple color became stronger, as they continued to cultivate before it gradually turned purplish-gold. This purplish-golden light cocooned them, and the three of them seemed like they had integrated into one body. Elder Xian could even feel their sublimation through their cultivation from the outside. Elder Xian exhaled deeply and nodded in approval inside. A three-way martial soul fusion skill could only be described as miraculous in the world of soul masters. Even though there were many questions and doubts in his mind that he wanted to ask Huo Yuhao, especially about his necromantic abilities and his battle against the angel, Yi Gai, now clearly wasn't the time to pose these questions. I'll bring them up in the morning. One of the most important reasons why Elder Xian had held Huo Yuhao accountable for the great explosion inside Radiant City before this was because his faith in Huo Yuhao had been shaken, and that was due to Huo Yuhao's display of abilities that only evil soul masters could possess. However, Elder Xian could feel the vast, righteous, and pleasant soul power undulations from the three of them, and he felt a little ashamed. Could somebody with a heart towards evil possess soul power like this? Elder Xian shook his head self-mockingly, as he sat down close to the three of them with his legs crossed and personally stood guard for them. The martial god Doluo, Xian Lina, watched over Shrek Academy's other soul masters. She was the Soul Tool Department's dean, and she glanced at Huo Yuhao from time to time. That was a human-shaped soul tool, and she would have contended with Elder Xian if now had been the right time. Everything seemed quiet and peaceful. However, what Shrek Academy's group of powerful individuals didn't know was that a thick fog was starting to permeate the western mountains. The entire mountain range seemed to come alive as peculiar transformations began to take place. How's the situation looking? The Sun Moon Empire's crown prince, Shu Qianran, was dressed in mourning clothes as he asked with a solemn look on his face. The Empire's defense minister was on one knee in front of him as he lowered his voice and said, "The situation has been stabilized, but we have sustained heavy losses, especially in our structures and buildings. The Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy has been completely destroyed, and the illustrious Virtue Hall's underground structures are probably." Shu Qianran waved him away and said, "I don't want to hear about our losses. I'm asking you about the citizens' feelings and what they are thinking." The defense minister replied, "The citizens' emotions are highly unstable, especially so for the families whose members have died or are injured. Many people have no homes to return to. There are many outsiders who came to spectate the tournament that have died or been injured as well." Shu Qianran nodded and said, "Pass the order, muster our resources in nearby cities, and immediately begin providing aid for the victims as much as possible. Assemble our armies and bring them into the city to maintain order. Kill those who dare to cause trouble and take advantage of the chaos. Kill those naysayers and those who try to turn the people against the empire. Kill those who dare to plunder or rape. We have to stabilize the situation as quickly as possible. Mark this day as National Funeral Day, and make sure that the news of the emperor's passing doesn't leak out. You will personally publicize and push the blame for this explosion on the Star Luo and Heavenly Soul empires." "Yes." The defense minister acknowledged respectfully. He admired the Prince Regent for settling down as quickly as possible, and Shu Qianran was still able to handle things properly and react accordingly even though so many things had happened one after another. This was the mark of a true ruler. "How about Shrek Academy, Your Highness? This matter is likely to be connected to them when we are announcing to the public." Shu Qianran shook his head and said, "Don't mention them. Shrek Academy is just an academy after all, and they are considered spiritual leaders for many soul masters at the same time. Dragging them into the fray will affect our strategy. I have my own plans to deal with them." "Yes. I'll take my leave, then. Go. Providing aid for the victims is our priority, and we have to stabilize them as soon as possible." Shu Qianran reiterated once more. The defense minister departed, and the mysterious imperial tutor dressed in black quickly walked in without announcing his arrival. He seemed to be in a good mood. "How's the situation looking, imperial tutor?" Shu Qianran asked with a concerned look on his face. The mysterious imperial tutor replied, "This incident has been greatly beneficial for my sect, and multiple powerful individuals from my sect have taken this opportunity to break through their bottlenecks. However, there's one issue that hasn't been dealt with properly: the Heavenly Soul Empire, the Star Luo Empire, and the body sect have all escaped. They actually prepared large amounts of drilling soul tools, and they used them to send their main members away. According to the holes that we've discovered, they managed to send out hundreds of people. Those that remain are scattered amongst the citizens, and it will be difficult to seek them out. Xu Qianran's expression became a little contorted as he smacked his left palm heavily with his right fist. Shit. I should have considered that. Those irritating rodents ambushed the illustrious Virtue Hall before. When Hallmaster Hongchen wakes up, we have to enhance the entire city's underground monitoring and surveying mechanisms. They must have been the ones who triggered the explosion in the underground warehouses. There's no way to break into those warehouses besides drilling through the ground. What happened at those underground warehouses had become a mystery after the explosion, and nobody knew exactly how things had played out. Xu Qianran could only push the blame on the Star Luo Empire and the Heavenly Soul Empire, because that was most beneficial for him, and so that he could have more reason to launch an invasion against them in the future. The Imperial tutor sounded solemn as he said, "You have sustained severe losses this time. Your Highness, oh, no, I should address you as Your Majesty now. Your Majesty, when are you going to mobilize your armies?" He was the Holy Ghost sect's founder, and he was the one who controlled those evil soul masters. Nobody was more eager for this war than he was, since the arrival of this war meant there would be incountable spirits for the Holy Ghost sect to make use of. Xu Qianran contemplated momentarily, then said, "This incident was too sudden. Stabilizing the citizens and the city has top priority at the moment. Furthermore, the destruction of the underground warehouses and the illustrious Virtue Hall was too damaging for us, and most of our soul tools that had been prepared for the war were destroyed. If you are willing to give your sex full strength, Imperial Tutor, we might be able to launch an invasion earlier." But the Imperial Tutor shook his head decisively and interrupted him. "We can only aid you from the shadows, and we cannot give our full strength. The world of Soul Masters has never accepted us. Even though we have enough strength to protect ourselves, openly participating in this war will undoubtedly draw out the other sects that have been hiding from the world. If that happens, it will be very difficult for you to execute your strategy and your plan. I think the war can be delayed, but we have to take this opportunity to intensify the citizens' hate for those two empires. We have to continue adding more soldiers and training them, and we have to build soul tools with everything we have so that we can make sufficient preparations for the war. Since we've already antagonized them openly, we have to make sure that our armies are equipped and prepared as early as possible. It's all right if nothing happens, but once we unleash our armies, we have to take them all down in one heavy and fatal blow." This video will end here.